can talk for days. There's so much to it, whether you're spin fishing for tuna, trolling, live bait. There's a million little things that can help or hurt. We could talk about this for days, is my point. So I'm going to try to go about an inch wide and a mile long on this specific topic. So some of the stuff I recommend in here, that's what's worked for me in the past. Line, knots, leader. You guys might do something different. That's what works for you is best, and I'm just going to share with you guys what's been the best for me. How about my buddy at the end there casting over him after we hook up? What a dick. No, that guy's right there, like that's the epitome of why we do this. That's when everything goes perfectly right. Boat positioning, casts, the type of lures you're throwing, where the fish are moving to, and we'll talk about this as we go through, but that's when everything goes right. What you don't see there is like the 100 times before that day, where we did the same thing, the same exact way, and I turned around and said, what the f are we doing wrong? And you just got to keep going. It's one of those things where you'll cast the same lures all day and do the same feeds, and then for whatever reason, that one presentation is going to be the difference between not getting a bite all day or tripling up right there. So today we'll talk about the seasons, where we're kind of looking for these fish, and really where do you find them. Key indicators of tuna. Boat positioning, approach, and casting, which for me is one of the most important things, and of course your tackle and your rigging. So spring season, I know for some of the older guys, and I know from talking to Gene and Jimmy, May was not really a bluefin time of year for us here in the Northeast. It was more so June and even July. So now we're lucky enough to experience the last few years, for me at least, or mid-May, early May, and a good thing about the spring is too, colder water, tons of mammal life, so some of the best whale, dolphin feeds. And we'll talk about why that's great, and that could be bad too, because that will also drive you nuts. You'll be sitting on whales and dolphins all day, and bait balls, and just. You all right? Bait ball.
Chair defect.
So where do you start? So understanding our midshore, inshore structure, we're unique in the fact that we have an awesome area with a ton of structure, a ton of wrecks, a ton of depth change inshore, offshore. So it's a big ocean, and finding out where you should start to look is one of the hardest things you'll do when you're early in the season, because you're going to put a lot of time in, a lot of hours with no success, and you just got to cover the ocean. To your point earlier about a network, that's definitely important, especially early on. Guys you trust that you talk to on a daily basis, maybe outside of fishing also. And you just split up, cover ground, and you just hope that the other guy lets you know when he finds it. But here's an example of that. This is early May. I want to say this was like May 13th. For us, it's either inshore early on, bigger fish, or offshore, closer to the canyons. This is an example of a day where on the left-hand side there, kind of the outer line of the track of my boat. So we're leaving out of Manasquan. We run north, go out towards the tip of the Hudson, see nothing, run down south, come back along the south edge, back into Manasquan. We didn't find fish till we got pretty much right here on the star, on the right-hand side there. So what's important about that is, like, going out that morning, so the day prior, so we have some context here, but the day prior, we had fish right inside the tip of the Hudson. So the next day going out, that's where I'm gonna start, right? Don't leave fish to find fish. On our way out in the morning in the dark, we stopped probably like 5 a.m., smelled them really heavy, marked some bait, marked some fish, and now it's like, what do I do? Do I stay here? There might be fish here, or do I leave and go back to where I was yesterday? So I left, went back to where I was yesterday, dead, lifeless, no fish. So now it's like, oh shit, do we go back in another 30 miles? And if that's beat, now we're kind of in that middle zone of, they were out there yesterday, maybe they're more inshore. So it's just important to, like, for me, I kind of look at where I'm at, where I caught the last fish, and kind of draw an 8-mile radius. So I just start to do loops, either loops or straight lines. So when you're looking at your map, okay, I know I've caught fish here years prior, south on this line, I was here yesterday, I'm gonna run this line south. So that day we didn't find anything, run the line south, come back down, maybe like 10 miles to the south of where we were in the morning, same thing. Find a couple birds, bait, all of a sudden that same line where we were, just a little to the south, had fish. So we left at whatever time in the morning, we didn't get a bite till like 3 p.m. And it took a long time, a lot of hours that day, a lot of fuel burn, but that's the difference. So once you do find that, luckily for us, those fish set up 30 miles from home, and we were able to fish there for the next like 2 weeks with not a lot of guys. So that's just the benefit to going out and searching, looking, because when you do find it, you can get it all to yourself. So inshore, where you want to look, where we look, shipping lanes. Out of the Northeast in the tri-state area, we have 3 main shipping lanes. Always seems to be life there, mammals, bait. You have good depth, comes up to shallow shelves on either side, in between them. Ridge lines, a few that we always check a couple miles off the beach before we go out. And then of course wrecks, right? You always hear, oh, they're at the AP, they're at this wreck, they're at this wreck. Are they ever actually on the wreck? Typically no, it's 8 miles to the northeast, 5 miles to the south. So that's just kind of a starting point. So the point is you find the life, work that area till you pretty much exhaust it, and then it's kind of on to the next one. So offshore, kind of mentioned this a bit early, 30, 40 fathoms. You want to watch the water temps early in the season, in the next month or so here. If we get any eddies that kind of push into the Hudson, that temp break on the flats kind of in that 30, 40 fathom line. It's a good area to start. The last few Mays, like I said, we've had some good catches out there and a couple really good days. Triple Rex, Chicken Canyon, Bacardi, all good areas to look early in the season. So key tuna indicators. I'm really big bird guy. I think it's really important. Knowing what types of birds are out there gives you a good indication of what the bait is. So what you want to look for? The obvious, whales, dolphins, breaking fish, of course, and then the not so obvious. Smell, slicks, types of bird play. That's a shearwater there. You see a lot of them early in the season. They're very hard to see because they fly so low to the water. A lot of times if you're moving to an area and you see a pack of shearwaters just sitting on the water, it's a good thing to stop, take a look around, give it a minute. They're there for a reason. Always a really good indicator of mammal life, if not tuna. Smell, that's something that's kind of a learned thing as you go along, but like I said, I've had it stop me in my tracks in the morning. It's good to make a mental note, make a note on your machine so you know where to look. You have a starting point or something to come back to. And then again, types of birds and bird play. So we'll show you here, this is again early, this is May. These are my favorite birds. I call them white birds, terns, gulls. For me, and my experience over like the last 5 years, if you see a couple of these white birds, it's a really good indicator that there's surface feeds going on. So a lot of times you'll see them in closer to shore, like 10, 20 miles off. If you're offshore, like those areas 20, 30 fathoms, and you see a pack of white birds, whether they're on the water or flying high, almost always an indication of some sort of pelagic feed, albies, tuna, and a really good indicator of topwater feeds. So shearwaters, I mentioned them. You'll see them pretty much throughout the season, but a lot in the spring and the fall. Gannets, really good indicator of inshore giants. I watch the birds more than I do the water when I'm driving the boat. A lot of times you guys will see 2 or 3 shearwaters up super high, like doing like a silo. If I see that, I'll just stop the boat and see what they're looking at, because it's either bait, a mammal, something. And a lot of times I'll follow those birds if they're staying in a general area. Something either just happened there or something's about to happen that they're seeing that we can't. So a lot of times we'll fish the gannets. You look for them, you'll see them, they're up so high, they start to dive, make your cast. Because they're already seeing that bait coming up. That bird's going to dive down, they swim 10, 20 feet down to get bait sometimes. Make your cast, you can time it right where we've had it where those birds dive, you cast. We're tight before the bird even hits the water. It's like you're dropping it in their mouth almost. A lot of luck is involved with that. And like I said, you'll fail more than you succeed, but you can't catch them if the line's not in the water. You can't always wait for that perfect bluefin feed where everybody's gonna cast in it and they stay up. Like some of these clips, that's rare.
Hook! Set the hook! Skyler, keep casting.
So you always see, but those are all tunas pushing on the surface and all the white birds just hammering right behind
that whole light. That was insane.
So on to some topwater tuna, our favorite. Running and gunning, again, searching for the birds, those white bird feeds. This can go all year long. Anywhere from 50 pound to 250 pound fish. Always be prepared. It's a game of opportunity. You could be out fluking. Have a tuna popping rod tied up on your boat. I can't tell you how many times, like 3 miles off the beach, 1 mile off the beach. Jimmy Frieda's in the background there. He was lifeguarding on the tower this year, and I was coming in, didn't catch anything, and he said, "You got to check out the beach. Something's going on. There's bait getting blasted." We had giants in like 25 feet of water off Spring Lake. So you really do never know, but you just always got to be prepared, because you'll get one shot at them, and that's the difference between catching the fish of a lifetime and not. So here's one. A day we were offshore, really rough. Came in, we were like 5 miles off the beach, and just saw bait getting sprayed everywhere.
Shut it! Shut it! Shut it! Shut it! Oh, let's go!
And another cool thing about our fishery too is a lot of the depths we're fishing, it's rarely over 200 feet. But you could catch a 70-inch fish offshore, 30, 40 fathoms, 220, 220 feet of water, that will fight harder than an 80-something incher in 60-something feet. So the good thing is every boat's different, but we have engines on the back of them. So a lot of times these big fish in the shallower water are just gonna run. You don't wanna chase them unless you need to. Let them fight the boat. I hear stories of guys, we hooked up, we went 25 miles. Yeah, if it's a 100-something-inch fish that just won't stop, I'm sure that's happened, but then you find out, it's a 71-incher. Let them fight the boat. The gear is there, Shimano, we use a ton of Shimano rods, reels, but the 18Ks, 20Ks, the line capacity, nowadays you really let the fish pull the boat. Let them fight the boat, that extra weight. I always turn the engines into the current. I really rarely move the boat to fight fish. Now my boat's different. It's a 25 contender, open bow. We can walk around the engines, the bow pretty easily. Cuddy cabin, sporty's a little different story. But same theory applies. So this is where we'll go into like approach and casting. So this is here, busting fish, for topwater, either, some of the ways throwing poppers would be obviously busting fish, casting on mammals and life, waking or pushing fish, which is my favorite, but also the most frustrating, and then blind casting, which is definitely hard to do. It's something that, like all fishing, it requires a lot of patience, but it's one of those things, once you succeed or even get a bite, now the next time you go out, it's like, I've done this before, I can get in the bite. So this is just me and my buddy. You see him, big feeds, small shearwaters. We see which way they're feeding. So we're pushing the boat up in front. We want those fish to come across our bow. Most guys are righties, he's a righty.
Got a boy.
This is another early May, right before Memorial Day. I think we were 30, shy of 40 miles that day. So fishing the mammals, there's all different types of mammal feeds. The more you do it, the more you'll recognize it. Circle feeding is one of my favorite. If you see two-tone dolphins and whales in the same area working together, really good indication that there's a big bait ball down there and obviously some fish. It's important boat positioning on the mammals. You want to be close to them. You want to be able to get your line, your guys casting into those feeds, but you also don't want to be so tight to them or so on top of them that you push the fish down, you spook the whales off. Now that bait ball, you just kind of separated it. So you don't want to run it over is my point. It's good when they're actively feeding. You can be a little relaxed about it. See which way they're moving against the current. Set up in front of them. Like anything, you want them to come right to you. Here is a example of that.
Right here, Jack.
You got dolphins coming from the right, whale in the middle.
Oh, there's a walrus. Go!
Let's fucking go, baby! Let's fucking go!
And then after that, sometimes the feeds, the mammals will break up or move away. Take note of where you were, where you got your bite. There's probably some sort of got to change structure there. Reset, come back, do that same thing again. Those fish, if they're in a certain area, they're not always going to be right on the mammals over here. They might be by themselves a mile away, feeding on the same bait. So it's important to take note of where you are every time you get a bite. And if it dries up, like midday, mid-morning, blind cast, do the same thing. So this is, I mentioned this, waking, pushing tuna. Picture on the left there is a bunch of bluefin just pushing on the surface. You'll see this on slick, calm days. Usually early afternoon, sunny day like this, that they're up sunning themselves. They're not always actively feeding. They might just be kind of moving around, and you'll know when you try to cast in the school and you watch them all go a million directions, but towards your lure. But you can see in this video, there's like 6 schools. There's one right there.
You can get ahead of those and you can throw it in front of them and just let it come back to the school.
Another one right there. And this is one of those things all day long. We scale down to 40-pound leader and albie jigs to get these things to bite. And this is why. Took this video the same morning. So you can see on the water there, it looks like there's like little raindrops. Cake, less than the size of your thumbnail. That's what they were eating all day. So that's why we had to scale down. We couldn't get them to eat. Also, this, when it's flat calm, they can be really finicky. Later in that week, the wind kicked up out of the south in the afternoon. We had the same thing all day like that. And then all of a sudden, those same fish, a little surface chop, we were quadding up on poppers like every single cast. So we started that day with, hoagie peanut jig, and it's going to be like yesterday. And by mid-morning, it was a full-blown popper bite, and it was the same bait, same tiny hake. So blind casting, fish deeper, not showing. Again, work the water column. Tons of lures out there, soft plastics. We use a ton that sink. Like we'll go into the lures a little bit, but you kind of want to see where that fish is, where you're marking them. And as you're casting, think in your head, okay, I'm moving this much, my drift is this. I'm kind of casting up here, so I'm not scoping myself out. And you kind of want to think as you're retrieving back, what depth am I at right now? What am I working? And sometimes you'll see, fish will come up, almost look at your bait, or right up to your depth where you're at, but not strike. And then whatever it is, an hour later, 2 hours later, sunlight, maybe more clouds, something about that day, all of a sudden now they turn on. So they never stop feeding, but now they're gonna eat your lures. Every day is different. That was like our motto last year. Areas were different, the way they fed was different, and nothing was changed. You know, we didn't have any weather pattern changes. Just every day is different. The best advice I can give is it's just a grind. I mean, if you spend enough time out there in a given day, you're gonna get a bite. So I have people always ask me what time are we gonna be back, and say, I don't know, around dark. So real important, approaching the feed. We want to take note as a captain kind of where the wind is for your anglers. You know, like I said, righties or lefties. But you want the wind at your back at all times if you can. It depends on who you have on the bow and what you're throwing. But you want to have the wind at your back, and you always want those fish to be kind of coming towards you. You don't want to set up behind them. You want to set up in front of them and kind of head them off. So here's another one. You see the feed, you can tell he's a righty, wind's in his back. Doesn't even move the lure. Right there. You just got to get it in front of them. When tuna are feeding, there's a really good video I saw from California where the guy had a drone, and there's always a lead fish. Always. They kind of flank them. In my experience, you get a bite and miss it, and then all of a sudden you get another bite, or you don't even move the lure. 99% of the time, it's a different fish. It's just think about how big and fast the tuna are. They're quick, but they can't hit this lure, come here, and then turn around and hit the same lure again. That's a reaction bite from another fish. So I always tell guys, finish your casts. You might get a blow up, a bite, all the way to the boat with bluefin. All the way to the boat. They will bite 8 times out of 10 right next to you. So just don't pull that plug out of the water right before you get to the boat. Leave it in, fish it out. Fish every cast out. So this is the wrong approach, what not to do. You see the fish, you kind of are, like all of us, get all jacked up and excited, and you want to get there as fast as possible. Take a second, take a breath, look, come in slow, don't spook them, look at what way they're moving. So this is the wrong approach. You see the fish, you kind of hammer down to it, you run them right over. Call it the Rosetto approach if you guys know it. So yeah, fish scatter, boat rolls in. Now your guys are standing on the bow. You might have birds here, fish here, and you have 3 guys on the bow that are looking at each other like, shit, we got to, one this way, and it just turns into a shit show. So also, tuna feed into the wind a lot. I got a good video here I'll show you in a minute from this fall, but they love pushing when you get those choppy days. They love pushing that bait up to the surface. So it's important too, and I meant to mention this earlier with the birds, to watch, as you're watching the birds, sometimes the fish will be feeding into the wind, the birds will be facing this way with the wind at their back, letting the fish push the bait, and then they're coming in behind them. And I learned this the hard way a bunch of times in the fall, chasing the birds, thinking, oh, I'm gonna get in front of them, they're coming to me, and then I'm watching the birds loop around each other and go back the opposite way. So that's something that you'll kind of notice as you go through. But again, feeding into the wind, you come in behind them or at the 90, you're gonna miss it. Because now you're gonna, even if they stay here, you're casting this way over them. They're facing this way. A lot of time, you might get a bite, but a lot of times you're not. Being in front of them and cutting them off like this, so the right approach, you gotta take the wind on your hip, drift into the fish. Now, this is where kind of that captain thing comes into play. Like if we're looking at the boat like that, you're thinking, okay, all my guys are lefties on the boat. So what are you gonna do? It depends on the situation. For me, I've done it where if it's calm, I'll come up and loop around to get them on this side. But if they're actively feeding hard right now and we need to get a shot at them, everybody just cast and step to your left. So like we saw in the first video. So not everything's always gonna be perfect. You're gonna have to make adjustments on the fly, but just the thought process is what I want you guys to look at next time you kind of get into this. So this is a really rough day. Not a lot of guys out. Heavy southeast winds, and the fish were feeding really hard into the wind. There's a little bit of water spots on the camera, but.
Over in front of the boat! To the right! Cast! Cast!
Oh my God, right there. God.
taking it.
So that's the same thing. Push heavy winds, pushing down. See, we have the wind at our back, kind of on our hip, casting towards the fish coming across the bow. And they busted a few times, then they went down. I mean, when I cast, I really didn't think I was going to get a bite there. I let it sink maybe longer than I typically would, and then got the bite on the second time I moved the lure. So, and like all lures you're using, poppers, stick baits, whatever, it's a reaction bite. So the right approach when the fish don't stay up. Feeding into the wind, head them off, quick casts, and then you keep moving. So that's when the fish don't stay up. As far as casting rods go, so Shimano is coming out with their new giant rods this year. I used all fall that ocean plugger, medium heavy, that was in that video there. It's the full throttle medium heavy. I love it. Soft tip. You can really, for soft plastics, it was great. Castability was awesome. But these are your like all around rods. Now, there's a ton of great custom rod builders out there. They have Boost here. Zach's Custom Rods is one of them. We have a bunch of those on the Freedom. We really like them. So again, like I said earlier, there's one to many. So it's kind of what you're comfortable with, what you do well with. This is just kind of what we're using to date. Casting reels, all Shimano. Everything from Stella's, Twin Powers, Saragossas, Spiros. Excited to try some of the new ones this year. But those are all around 10 to 20K. I would say for your kind of medium bluefin, when I started and couldn't afford a lot of this stuff, it was all Saragossas for me, 10Ks, 14Ks. Luckily now we've got a bunch of Stellas and Twin Powers in the mix, but if you're just starting out, like a Shimano Saragossa 14K is great, all around reel. And then of course you move up the ladder, Twin Powers, Stellas. And we'll talk a little bit about the Giants and what we use for those. Stop by the booth, guys, Shimano booth at the front there if you guys got any questions or want to talk anything more in depth on this stuff. So again, to each his own, but this is what we use, 80 to 100 pound hollow core for Giants and 60 to 80 pound max quattro, thinner braid, get more on your lighter spools. I use the 65 pound white for as pretty much, I'd say like 7 out of 10 rods throughout the season, and I've never had an issue. So this is where it gets touchy. Everybody does something different with their knocks and their leader. For me, I've tried everything. The FG knot with the Rizzuto finish, and it's important that you get that you do the Rizzuto finish. There's a bunch of good videos on YouTube to learn about this stuff. Again, it's just trial and error. But then once you do it 5 or 6 times, now you can do it with your eyes closed. It's been the most successful knot for me. Knock on wood, we haven't had any connections break. Pop leaders, of course, but the knot has never failed. Terminal tackle, split rings, barrel swivels, everything we use is BKK. The Raptor Z's, you're all around size 4, 3 and 4. And then they make the T-Rex, the giant ones, so we use on our bigger Amagari poppers. And again, your connections are critical to your success. A lot of times when you're fishing soft plastics, they'll choke it. So you'll hook them and it'll be down on your gut. And now that leader's rubbing the whole time on those, on their teeth. I used to, when I started, Gene and I would argue about leader, and I would say, oh, you gotta scale down because you got 5 bites on 60 pound or 80 pound. It's like, yeah, but then when you get the one bite that's not the fish that you're seeing, you're not gonna land them. That leader's gonna pop. So like this fall was the first time that I've used, every single rod had at least 130 on it, and I didn't have any issues getting bites at all. I think that might come into play a little bit when you're in bluer water, cleaner water offshore, depending on the activity of the fish. Sometimes you might need to scale down, like that waking, pushing stuff. That definitely worked for us that day, but those were also smaller fish. I would have never done that with 50 inches, because the chances of you landing them on 30, 40 pound leader, slim. So this is just an example of getting a bluefin close to the boat. FG knot, it's great about it, you reel it right through the guides. You can watch the fish, he rolls over, kicking the braid, kicking the line, he rolls over on the leader. And that's the benefit of having a 130-pound there. So any lighter leader, he probably would have popped that off on his sickles or his jawline, but that's why it's really important, your connections, make sure your knots are good, test them out the night before. You don't want to be getting in the boat and trying to do it on the fly because you're going to rush and you're going to make mistakes. So preparedness is key. Stick baits. So kind of all the times of when we're going to use them. So floating when it's nice and calm and slicked out. Sinking when you get that rougher water. You're getting the tunnel feeds. A lot of times you let that stick bait sink down. Sometimes you don't have to move it and they'll just kind of eat it on the way up. Great for castability, long casts. You can really sling some of these. And the great thing about stick baits is you can match the hatch. So a lot of times, you know, small baits, hake, like this is a jackfin stick bait in here. You know, it looks like an algae jig, but that was one of those blind cast ones, trying to match the same size of the bait because we couldn't get a bite all day. And, you know, towards the end of the day, we finally got in front of them and it worked out. Soft plastics, there's a bunch of great soft plastics out there. My favorite, and I've used it since I've been doing this, is the Hoagie Pro Tail. I love fishing these things. You can fish it a bunch of different ways. My favorite way to do it, you're casting out, burn it back to you, stop it, let it flutter, fall into where maybe a fish just boiled or a whale or whatever it is. Same thing, a lot of times you'll get that dead bite, reaction bite. You can fish them deep, shallow, great all around lure. No live bait, 8-inch split tail and paddle tail really came on strong for us in New Jersey this fall. Big sand eel bites, bigger sand eels, and had a lot of fun fishing those as well. Hoagie harness jig, tried and true. Wolfpack Tackle's got some new stuff out this year. Caught a lot of yellowfins on them last year casting. And then again, bronzies.
With this kind of stuff on the at the end that you mentioned that you're using the swivel and the split ring, are you
Yep.
are you knotting or crimping?
Knotting.
You're, even with 130?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How are you knotting with 130? Out of curiosity.
I don't know. Yeah, and 150 too. Improved clinch.
Okay.
But you know, it's funny, and I encourage you guys to like talk to other captains. Or I learned something yesterday. The guy was testing out, Matt, testing out all his knots, and I think it was like the Berkeley trilene knot that he used was like the strongest. And I was like, well, what have you been tying in the past? And improved clinch, same. So there's not one, you know, end all be all, but yeah, I use the improved clinch, and I like, other than giants or really big fish, I always tie direct. Paddle tails I tie direct because I just like the action better than the barrel swivel and the split ring. But I've also used them with the barrel swivel and the split ring and caught fish too, so it's kind of like a personal thing for me. But you know, for the amount of bites that you get on the soft plastics and where they wind up, them choking it or setting the hook, that barrel swivel and split ring at that point, it's really not doing much. So I'm more of the thought process of I'd rather get the bite. You know, for me mentally, I just feel like I can move that lure better, tie direct, have a better feel for it. But again, I have guys that I fish with all the time that do it the opposite way and do well. So poppers. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I heard your answer, but is there a specific reason you don't run?
No, there's not. I have been, I want to say we did pull a crimp a couple of years ago, my brother and I, and you know, we blamed each other, but
So it's concern of pulling, not cutting, or mainly because you're concerned with the pull?
yeah, it's not even that, because I know guys that crimp and don't have an issue. I could see it doing it on poppers. I would also just worry about that, again, the swimmability of your plug with the crimp. But yeah, that's a good question. There's no real rhyme or
Like a
reason.
130 or 150 ball at the end of the lure?
Yeah.
No matter what the knot is, I mean, I feel like, and I'm not arguing,
No, I agree.
I'm curious just because of the 80 and smaller, I can see it.
Yeah.
130 and 150, I feel like it's an obstruction of us from
Yeah. You mean like casting it?
Anything, yeah, casting it, just because, again, I mean, I'm not sure the knot, I have to look up the knot you said.
Yeah.
I don't know all the knots, but, depending on what it looks like, I feel like there's a ball in front of the lure to some extent, with that side of the line.
Yeah, yep, yeah, I could see that. If you stop by, we have a couple tied up at Shimano booth, you'll see. It's not as bulky as you would think, and especially, for the size lures, 8 inches and stuff, it's,
Fair enough.
poppers. So Mad Mantis, Amagari, UVT fishing. Shimano's got some really good stuff that casts a mile. And again, always have one rigged. There's never a bad time to use a popper. When I started, I always used to think, we got to match the hatch, or we have to use epoxies, or we have to, it's too calm for poppers. And then you throw a popper out there, and it's all of a sudden you just get smashed. So always have a guy in the boat. Depending on how many guys are fishing, you always want a popper in the water. That first video, I think we had a paddle tail, popper, and a stick bait got bit.
I know you're talking center console.
Yeah.
I got a 40-foot sport fish. I mean, doing a run and gun out of that.
Right.
When you're looking at these schools coming up, I mean, do you want to cast a starboard and face the current?
Good question. So, on a sporty, it depends, if you have guys on the bow or not. But it's the run and gun thing, and you're not really running and gunning. There's those instances where you have like an hour, and they're popping up everywhere, and you got to get in them. Even in the fall, a lot of times our bites, more times than not, we are stationary, or we just got to a feed and we missed it, and now there's a feed over there and there. For me, I used to run feed to feed to feed. Now, if I'm just in that area where, maybe we didn't get to it, our bites all the time go slow. I go very slow, like sometimes one engine in gear, and I just try to visualize like they were right here, the current's going this way. My best guess is they're gonna pop up over here to the left. So I kind of just go very slow. And it's funny, looking back at all my videos, like even that one where bullshit talking, oh my God, they're right there in front of the boat. So it's, always be ready, but you don't, at that run and gun, it's more of a mentality. It's not, you don't really need to be hammering down to feeds. You just got to have your anglers in a general area to cast.
I mean, do you put your bow to the direction of the fish?
Yeah. Yep. For me, my guys are casting off the bow, and if you're driving a sporty, and
They're casting off the stern.
so they're casting off the stern, so I would spin the boat, come up to the feed, the fish are here, and you're driving, and it looks like they're going this way. I'd come over here and turn your ass around and let them pass behind you, so you guys can cast off the back. So you don't need to be right on them. I'm always thinking like, where are they gonna come towards me? Like I wanna be in the area so we can reach or generally get close enough. But I'm always thinking of kind of after the fact, where they're gonna come to. So giants on sport gear. So I've landed 7, released 2, and lost 5 in the last 5.5, 6 years. So not insane numbers, but for our fishery, and the fish that we do get, like, you say those numbers to Cape Cod guys are like, what a clown. But, for us in our fishery, it's something that's, it's definitely a challenge, but like I said earlier, with that water depth that we're fishing and having the ability to kind of chase the fish down when needed, and a lot of times you're fighting them more up here versus down deep. That kind of comes later in hour 3. When you're 20 feet from the boat. But this can be kind of, again, May and June, early season. We had a couple years ago in May. This is like May 7th, right off the beach. They're usually on big bait, so bunker, herring. So big bait, big lures. A lot of teamwork involved with this. I've learned the hard way, don't try to do it with 2 guys. You gotta have at least 3 guys on the boat. And it's just a constant communication. Somebody on the wheel if need be to spin on them. But here's an example of some giants feeding on bunker.
Oh yeah!
So this is, this is one of those bites. This is, again, inshore, a couple miles off the beach. We were bass fishing in the fall coming home, and we saw a couple gannets. And it was really hard northwest wind, which they love, and the tuna. And we're watching the birds. We saw a couple, we're like, oh, that's a striper. Those are bass, those are bass. And then all of a sudden we saw the bombs going off. And this is one of those things. We didn't get to them. We waited for the birds. They started hovering. My mate Brian there made a cast, and he literally casted, flipped the bail over, and was tight. But this is to just point it out. This is how it starts when you hook up with one of these fish. Everybody's laughing.
Good job, good job, good job, good job, good job. You really know how big that shakes. What a sick bite. Here. How you feeling, Brian?
So that's how it starts, talking shit to him in the beginning, and then by hour 4, we were like, he goes, my hand seized up, and I almost dropped the rod in. It was, we wound up losing this fish, like 10 feet down. It was the biggest fish I'd seen in person, over 100 inches, and we saw him, and he rolled over on the line, and the braid exploded. So that sucked. But that's how it starts, you're joking around, oh, we got a bite, and then you really don't realize kind of what you're getting into. This is us from the fall this year on a different fish, 3 of us fighting it. We were like 3 hours in at this point. We wound up releasing it like 85, 87 inches. But you can hear it's just, your muscles give out. And that's why it's just, if you give up, you're gonna win. Like, you have to, every inch, and that's what's great about the Stellas. Every crank, you get a lot of line back. That's FG
Got a quick question.
Yeah.
What's the best size rod for offshore Jersey?
Just like all around?
Yeah, how many gram rating? Like 100, 150, 200?
Yeah, I would say, at least lengthwise, you want to be in that like 7, 8 to 8 foot range. As far as, I gotta look at mine. Yeah, like 200, 250 maybe. Yeah.
With that last video, like
Yeah.
the last 30, 40 feet always seems to be kind of the hardest, right?
Yes.
How much pressure, if you've got like an Oshio or a grappler or something like that,
Yep.
do you think you could really beast into them, or do you have a different technique for getting that last 30, 40 once you've got them in the spin?
Yeah, once you get them in that pinwheel, it's like, we were going, I would say maybe like 20, 30 seconds on the rod at that point, because you're just trying to break that fish's will. That's something that you kind of gauge throughout the fight, like how's the rod handling. Like, we've had ones where you can feel like the reel seat's about to bust out, and you're kind of like, oh shit, like let's back off a little bit. But I set my drags all at like 22 pounds, like at least, so I know where they're at. And throughout the fight, like once we get them in that range, every time I lift up, if I'm still hearing like a little drag coming out, I'll just slowly give it a couple clicks. Because once you see them there, it's like, shit, you want to get them to the boat as
So you're
fast
really
as
getting
possible.
them in that, like, because we only get a couple a year.
Yep.
And it feels like with more experience, you probably get more comfortable with that very tight range of tolerance of
Yes.
the drag, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and it's like, it all depends on the angler too. I mean, it's, you just want to, that's something you kind of really feel out as you get into that last 20, 30 minutes there.
But as you get more experience, do you feel like you can put more and more pressure on them? And
Yeah, yeah, I'll like when, he settled down like that in the beginning for like 5 minutes, and then he just like came up and took off in the middle of the fight. Yeah, so like we got towards the end and we were getting him back, and you could really feel the rod, like you still had some give. So like there's a picture in here at the end, you'll see it's like, 6 to midnight bent, or 12 to 6 bent. So yeah, it's just kind of go by the tackle and feel it out as you go.
And you'd rather bump the drag up a little bit than if you've got an experienced angler,
Yeah.
use a little palm pressure on?
Yep. I personally, I hate doing that. Because now you have somebody applying an external force to the drag system. So, you know, it depends on the fish, but on those big ones, I hate guys palming it, like let the drag do its thing.
Okay.
And that's, again, a little bit of a feel where, you know, a couple more cranks. There's only been a few instances where we were like fully locked down and couldn't get any more of that.
And you're just talking about clicks on the drag.
On the
not-
drag, like on a Stella, like one or
Cranks.
2 clicks is all I would do, yeah, yep. But it's, you get all through that chaos, you're tired, exhausted, and then you're like, okay, well, here's the end game. We put a dart in him, it broke. Put a gaff in him, he got out of it, it broke. And this is 3 of us were trying to get a tail rope on him. We had a marlin gaff in the back, my buddy Schlegel was holding it with his feet locked in it, and he was pulling the boat first. They never give up. And this is right when you lose them typically. This is when you can lose them, right at the boat. Here's a couple from, this is, you know, one day in October going offshore for yellowfin. Had to turn around because it was so rough. And coming back in, we saw some whales like an hour earlier. We're like, oh, let's go check that out. We pulled up, we were 25 miles off the beach. It's still the farthest I've seen a giant school of bunker out there. It was like 120 feet of bait. It was like a silo. And, you know, it's just a game of opportunity too. So these were both in like the mid 80s. Then one from the fall. You know, if you do have an opportunity to release them, like the one thing I can say is like they're special fish. Use the right gear, use the right line, use the right setups, because one, you're gonna kill yourself if you do get that bite. It's so hard to get the bite, so when you do, you know, you wanna be confident in the gear that you have. So these are all rods that we've caught fish on. I'm excited to try the Ocean Big Game this fall, or this year. All great stuff. Shimano, Stella, 18K, 20K. They have a 30K now too. Again, Cortland line, 100-pound hollow core. And another knot, I know Gino ties this a lot. It's very hard, but a twisty knot. So it's mono and leader twisted. And that's, you know, that'll really help with your abrasion resistance on the fish. The only reason I don't like it as much is just castability. It's hard to cast, shorter leaders, but something to look at if you guys don't like the FG. Yeah, FG, twisty knot, 130 to 200 pound. And that's it, guys. Any questions?
How long are your leaders?
So on my, I like my leaders from your maybe 2 inches down from your tip. I don't like casting my leaders through the guides if I don't have to. That's why I like to have G-knot, because when you're fighting a fish, you can pull it through the guides no problem. And if you need to in a pinch, you can definitely cast it through. But yeah, I try to keep it from just an inch or so down. So you don't need those super long leaders, especially for the casting stuff, because you know you're putting that bait in front of those fish. A lot of times it's a reactionary bite or they're tunnel feeding, so it's not like a different type of any type of other pelagic or maybe even yellowfin that have better eyesight that can see your leaders that you know aren't feeding as aggressively as bluefin do.
Time of year or position where you're looking for more than 5 to 20 miles or
Yeah.
50 miles?
Yeah, every year has been different. I would say May, depending on the temp a couple of years ago, it was really warm. Just warmer weather. It felt like they came in earlier. But for giants, I would say it's mostly May, June, into early July, and then like October, November, December even. The thing about giants is like they can regulate their body temperature so well. So one thing I learned this year, the warmest recorded that they had them in was 81 degrees, and the coldest was 32 degrees. So they can pretty much go wherever they want.
Are you doing straight braid to,
Yeah,
straight braid to?
braid to leader, yep.
Full model from the shop?
Nope. Just, yep, fluoro, braid fluoro.
So if you're using helical, you really don't need to tie the FG knot then?
I do though, I do, but you don't. You can do that, that twisty knot, wind-ons, but yeah, I tie that
For
jig.
hollow core?
For the big fish, yes, yeah, for giants, but it doesn't sink well, so it's tough on stick baits. If it just really floats, you can't really use a jig, and I have it on two rods that I'll keep on it all year. And then pretty much everything else is a range of 65 pound to 80 pound. Well, thanks for your time, guys. Appreciate it. Enjoy the show. If you have any questions. What's up, man? What's up?